Hey guys, my name's Taylor, and today in this sewing kit we are going to learn how to make a really cool back of the seat car organizer. As you can see, this organizer blends in because it's black, but it holds all these goodies. So before we get started on the actual project, we want to make sure that our sewing machine is out and ready to go. Make sure that you've threaded the top and bobbin thread in matching thread and changed out your sewing machine needle. Those needles should be changed after every project or about every 8 hours of sewing. Now for most of this project, we will be using a straight stitch, and you can keep your tension on the normal settings. The first fabrics that we are going to work with are these mesh pieces. Now these are going to turn into pockets with elastic along the top. So we need to make a casing or a little loop or a tunnel for this elastic to go through. We're going to use our iron to press over about an inch or inch and a half of this mesh fabric. Now don't hold your iron on there too long. We wouldn't want to melt this. Now you can see that this is easily holding in place without the need for pins. We're going to do this with both of these pieces of mesh, and then we're just going to sew along this bottom edge here that we turned under. Now this may seem weird that we're sewing on something with such big holes, but it will hold together. If you would like, you can go over it a couple times with a straight stitch. Just make sure that you're stitching close to this bottom raw edge so that we have a big enough tunnel to put the elastic through when we get to that. Once we have these two pieces sewn, we are going to attach them to the main part of our organizer. You can see that you have two pieces of fabric here. One is going to be the backing, so we're going to set that aside for the moment. The other is going to be the front that will have the pockets sewn on. We're going to start at the bottom pocket. So first, make sure that whichever side has this raw edge hanging off of it is towards the back of the pocket. Now we're going to find the center of this pocket piece by folding it in half. We're also going to find the center of this backing piece by folding it in half. Now we're going to match up these centers. Now we're going to match up these centers with a pin. We're going to make sure that we are lining up this bottom edge here, but you can hang this pocket netting off about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch if you would like. That way we just make sure that when we sew it, it gets caught. Now I'm going to put another couple of pins here, but not all the way to the edge, and I'll show you why in a second. All right, now we're going to take these edges and line it up with this edge. And the same on this side. Okay, now this looks super funny. There's these weird little bubbles here. But the reason that we have to do this is to give some depth to our pocket. If we just sewed it straight across, there'd be no room in there to store anything. Remember, we're going to put elastic across the top so that will hold it flat, but we need some dimension on the bottom. In order to do that, we're just going to move this wrinkle as far towards this pin as we can, and then fold it over towards the edge and pin in place. Now make sure that all of your netting through this whole fold still is lined up with this bottom edge here. Now, what you have done very easily is made what is called a pleat. Now it's time to move on to our next pocket. We're not going to sew this right now because we're going to do it all at once. Again, with our next pocket, we want to find the center by folding in half. And we want to find the center up here by folding this piece in half. Now, if you want, you can take an iron and make a little crease right here. I'm going to do that. That way I don't have to keep my finger on the center the whole time. There we go. Now we can easily see the center of our piece. I'm going to line this up on the center, but upside down, once we decide where we want our pocket. We don't want to put it all the way up towards the top up here, because what will happen is there will be nothing as a back for things that you put in there. Instead, we're going to put it down a little further. So we can take and line up the center and then flip it upside down. Make sure that this is about 1 to 2 inches away from the top of our bottom pocket, and then we're going to pin this in place. This may sound super strange, but what we're doing is we're making it so that when we sew this together and fold it up like so, the raw edge is hidden inside of the pocket. All right, now again, we are going to want to have a 3-dimensional pocket up here. So we're going to take and line this edge up with the end over here and make another one of these plackets. This doesn't have to be perfect or symmetrical. But if you want, you can take a ruler or straight edge and make sure that this line here is pretty straight. Then we're going to go to our sewing machine and sew along this top pocket edge that we just pinned. Once we have sewn this, it is okay to take out the pins. Once these pins are taken out, we're going to fold this straight up. You can iron this bottom part of this pocket in place if you would like. I'm not going to because I like how it looks like a 3D pocket. Next, we're going to line these edges up with the side here and pin in place. Now you can see that we have 2 pretty good sized pockets. Our next step is to thread the elastic through the top of each pocket. Now, you can easily thread this through by starting on one end of the tube and going through like so by hand. It will not be that hard. I have one of these handy dandy elastic threaders, so I'm just going to use this. Okay, now, once you have this through, you're going to leave a little bit of extra tail elastic over here, not too much, maybe about 1 inch. And then pin this elastic piece in place. Then we are going to pull this elastic so that it's tight because we want the top of this pocket to be held very tightly. Now this is probably going to scrunch up the back of this a little bit, but that is okay. All right, once you get that pulled as tight as you want, you can pin this other end in place. This will hold it all together. Then go ahead and cut this tail about an inch away from the end and do the same thing on the bottom pocket. Now we will use the rest of this elastic later, so just set this aside for now. Now you can see we pretty much have 2 pockets made. I want to make this top pocket into 2 separate pockets instead of having a large pocket on the top and the bottom. In order to do that, I'm going to spread out these wrinkles just a little bit so that there's not a weird cross wrinkle up the center of this piece. And then I'm just going to pin this in place up the center of this top mesh piece. Once I have this pinned, I'm going to sew straight up the center. Remember to backstitch at the bottom and the top so that your stitching doesn't come unraveled. Now we are to the step of making this so that it will actually stay on the back of a seat of a car. I'm going to show you how to measure the car seat that you want this to go on the back of in a second. But if you are giving this as a gift or don't know what car you want to use this for, cut 2 pieces of 12-inch elastic for the top piece, and then cut the remaining elastic into 2 equal pieces for the bottom. You'll then pin this as so in this top corner, 1 12-inch piece, the second 12-inch piece here, and then the long pieces, 1 at each bottom corner. Alright, so I'm out at my vehicle and I have my remaining triangular-ish piece. I have my scissors and I have all of my elastic. Now what we're first going to do is hold this piece up against the back of our seat where we pretty much want it to hang when we're using it. Now we're going to take this elastic and hold it on each corner like so around the top. Remember, this narrower part goes towards the top of the seat. Once we have that measurement, we're going to cut where we measured. Now this is going to be our piece to go around the top to hold it around the top of our seat. Next, we need to use this big piece to measure around this front here to hold the bottom towards the back of the seat. And I'm going to cut this right here. Now remember, each seat is going to be a little different, and this elastic stretches quite a bit. So pull it tight, not super tight, but pretty tight while you're measuring, and then it will definitely hold when we sew it together and put it on our seat. One thing to remember as well, if you get this sewn together and it's a little loose on your seat, you can always take this elastic and tie a little knot in it, like so, to help make that elastic piece that you measured a little shorter. That's a super easy way to fix the problem without having to rip out all your stitching and remake a new piece of elastic. Now that we have measured out these pieces of elastic, or if you have the 2 pieces that are standard for every vehicle, we are going to pin these on to this piece that already has our pockets. Now we're going to take the smaller of the 2 pieces, which is for our top, and we are going to pin it with about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch hanging off the top here. We want to pin about 1/2 to 3/4 inch from this long edge. Now the reason that we're doing that is because we're going to sew up this edge about 1/2 inch, which is our seam allowance. And we want, once we have sewn that far, we want that to be right on the edge of this elastic. Now it's important that we pin this so it looks like it's inside out for our next sewing step. Again, if you have the 2 pieces that are standard, you're just going to pin these to this corner up here and let the cut edges hang down that way. What you're going to do when you actually put this on your vehicle then is hold this where you want it and then tie those two ends together tight enough to get it to hold in place. Now let's do the same thing down here with our longer piece. Except this time we are going to pin across the bottom like so. So make sure that you're 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch up away from this bottom. Now we're almost done. One thing we're going to check is that our bottom piece here of this pocket is not squishing out like so. If yours is, pull it back up and put a couple extra pins in place to hold that in place as we sew everything together. All right, now it's time to finish this. We're going to do that by grabbing this other piece of ours and lining it up with the piece on the back. Now this might take a little bit of doing because everywhere that this elastic is across the pockets is going to pull together. So we're going to start on this top here because that's an easy place to start. I'm just going to line these two up and put a couple pins in here. All right, now we're going to go down one of these edges. You can tug on these elastic pieces if you need in order to straighten everything out. I am going to use these pins that I already have in place. I'm just going to pull them out temporarily and then put them back in. If you do this, make sure that the pins that you take out from the elastic part definitely go back in to where the elastic was, because remember, we stretched that elastic a little and we don't want that to suck back into the center here while we are sewing. Now that I've gotten this end done, I'm just going to keep working around until I get all 4 sides pinned together. Once that is all pinned, we are going to sew all the way around this piece. Now you want to make sure that you leave a hole that you don't sew in the bottom, probably about a hand's width, so 5 to 6 inches. This is how we're going to turn this inside piece right side out when we're done. So begin here, back stitch, sew to here, and then come all the way around, come to the other side of the hole, back stitch. The back stitching is going to make it so that the threads do not unravel. Also, what you can do so that you can make this all in one continuous stitch is once you start stitching towards a corner, when you get about 1/2 inch away from the corner, use the knob on the right side of your sewing machine to make sure that the needle stops in the down position. Once the needle is stopped in the down position, you can pick up your presser foot and pivot this around the needle, put your presser foot back down, and continue stitching. This is a huge time saver. Before we can turn this right side out, we need to get rid of all the extra fabric in the corners. In order to do so, we're just going to cut straight across like this on all the corners. Make sure that you do not cut across your stitching, otherwise that will make the stitch line come undone. The reason that we're doing this is it will just make things lie a lot flatter when we turn them right side out. Don't cut any of this elastic and make sure that you've gotten all the pins out. All right, once that's done, we can reach our hand into this hole that we left at the bottom, grab onto this top corner, and pull it right side out. When you turn this right side out, make sure that you use your finger or the end of a pair of scissors or a pen or pencil to poke out these corners nice and square. Then we are going to turn this upside down and iron this flat. When ironing this, it's easiest to start at a corner and work our way up. Make sure that you pull out this edge as you iron so that it lays flat in the shape that we want it to. Now, when we get to this bottom part where we left the hole, we're going to want to tuck all of this raw fabric, the raw edges, into itself so that it forms a straight line, and press this down in place. Then we want to take a couple pins and pin this together so that we can sew it together and there will no longer be a hole. All right, let's take a look at the other side here. Now we can see it's starting to look like a car organizer. We've got some pockets, but we want to make sure that this really lasts the test of time. We don't want these elastics to pull out from use, and we don't want these pockets to rip out on the edges from use. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this really sturdy and sew this hole closed all at the same time. Now the way that we're going to do that is we're going to top stitch around this edge here. Top stitch just means that we are stitching closer to the edge than we normally do with our seam allowance. That way we make sure that we catch this 1/2 inch that we turned in here. So in order to start, we need to make sure that all these wrinkles are pulled away from the edge here. That way we don't sew over this and accidentally sew on a wrinkle. Then we don't even have to pin any of this. We pinned the bottom, which is what we're worried about, and we're just going to go to our sewing machine and sew along here. If your machine has a setting to move the needle from the left to the right position, it will be really easy to top stitch if you can move the needle all the way to the right. If not, just set this so that your presser foot hangs a little bit off of the right of the fabric, which will make the needle go right down, right along the edge. Now that we have finished our back of the seat car organizer, we can go ahead and install it on our seat. Now you would think that you would put the top on first, but we're actually going to put the bottom on first. So we're just going to slide this around this entire seat all the way down to the bottom where the elastic should rest on the bottom of the back of the seat. Then we're going to take this top part and just pull it around the top. And there we go. You can see this awesome organizer that we can fit all of our goodies in. I hope that you had so much fun, and I hope that you enjoy your awesome car organizer.